Hey guys, it's Kevin, my review for Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. And this film, we center on a group of friends, and they have been friends for a while now, but specifically we center on the character of Sophie. She has recently recovered from addiction, and as a result, she's kind of distanced from her friends, and so she gets this invite to go to this sleepover of sorts that her best friend is hosting. They're going to try to do this as a way to reunite everyone, but also introduce them to her new girlfriend. And eventually, while they are all hanging out and reminiscing, they decide to play a classic game that they used to play as teenagers called Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. It is very much a sort of, it is very much a Clue type game. It's a very twisted game of hide and seek in that way that always involves in somebody getting murdered. But it also is a game that has usually resulted in a lot of, explosive arguments. It hasn't gone very well for these characters, and once this storm ends up occurring, the characters find that a murder has actually taken place, and now their job is to find the killer among them, but also kind of confront a lot of the insecurities that they are all facing. So Bodies, 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 I was so pumped for this film. The marketing, the concept behind it, all of it just seemed like my kind of shit. Like, this is the kind of film that I just absolutely eat up. A24 has been so consistent lately. I say this all the time, but especially when it comes to horror films, you know, I think that they are the most consistent within that genre. But this was also the kind of film that they haven't really tackled before. They haven't really done a horror comedy, and seeing them kind of take a stab at that, pun not intended, right off the bat, but seeing them actually try to attempt that, I was very excited to see how this film was going to turn out. It had a really great cast behind it. It seemed like it was going to be a really fun premise, and I was just really hoping that this film could be just a really fun watch, but also be just another, and this has been such a terrific year for horror, and I was just really hoping this film could continue the trend, and it absolutely does. Now, I will say right off the bat, this is not really a horror movie. That is something that you should know very much, when you are viewing this film. That is not the kind of movie that this is. However, it is such a incredibly relevant and hilarious satire that I think is definitely going to be a film that when people look at this generation, I think Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is going to be one of the films that defines this generation the best. It also just happens to be one of the funniest films of the entire year. But we are just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And that's absolutely one of the best parts of this entire movie. I think one of the things I was most excited for going into this was the cast here. And I'll just say right now, everybody really does end up delivering in this film. I really don't think there is a weak link among the bunch that we have here. I think everyone does a really strong job. But let's first talk about Amandla Stenberg, an actress that I've always been a really big fan of. I think that she is someone who, she started off popping up in some movies, a lot of which I hadn't seen, but I feel like the further she's gotten into her career, the more she has just grown into this incredible actress, especially in something like The Hate U Give. I think she has just been on such a consistent streak since then, and once again here, I think she does give a really strong performance. Sophie is someone who has been through a lot, and she also has a lot of secrets that she hasn't really told anyone about, and the way that Stenberg plays this role, I thought she just did such a great job with, because on the surface, Sophie seems like somebody who is very content with how she is, but she also seems to be very insecure about things that have gone down within her past. She often doesn't want to talk about it all that much, and, as the film goes on, you start to discover more layers of this character, and it was because of Stenberg's performance that it worked as well as it really did. I think she leads the film very well. She's someone that you really want to know more about, and I really liked what she ended up doing here. I thought that she did a really great job in this film. But also Maria Bakalova. I mean, it is so great to see her in another movie. That is not The Bubble, of course. I haven't reviewed that film, but trust me when I say it is only up from here in terms of The Bubble. I will eventually review that in I will eventually review that in what I watched video, but I'm just very happy to see that she has a role that continues to utilize her talents, and she's playing a very different role than what we've seen from her. B is not the kind of character that is very energetic. B is not the kind of character that is gonna have all these crazy one-liners like we saw in Borat's subsequent movie films. She's a lot more reserved and to herself, but she's also very mysterious in this way. There's a lot that people just don't really know about her, and I think that she just did a really good job of playing this character that we're constantly fascinated by. We want to know more about her, but we also kind of see her as the outsider of this group, and I think that she portrays that role very well. And the chemistry between her and Amandla Stenberg, I mean, these two work really well together. They're really the thing that draws you into this movie immediately. The beginning of this film really is relying on their chemistry, and both of them just do a really great job in this film. You do find yourself really caring for the both of them, and I thought they both did a really good job leading this film overall. But the rest of the cast also, I think, gives some really strong performances. Myha'la Herrold is an actress that I have not seen before, but she is fantastic in this movie. I really can't get into her character all that much, but she is fantastic here. She has such a great screen presence. Same goes for Chase Sui Wonders. I haven't seen her either, but she gives a really strong performance. I saw her a little bit in the show Generation from last year, but I haven't really seen her in anything besides that, and I think she gives a really strong performance here as well. I really like what she ended up doing. Lee Pace and Pete Davidson are not in this movie all that much, but for what they have, they both do a really good job. I thought both of them were just a lot of fun in this movie. Lee Pace is playing this very, like, eccentric, very sort of, very sardonic character, and I think he plays that character very well. He's the kind of character that is just very, like, enigmatic in that way, and I think that he plays that character well. And then even Pete Davidson, yeah, he's playing kind of a dick in this movie, but he does it really well, and I really liked what he ended up doing, and the film does make the most out of both of their screen time. The movie really is about the girls, but I thought both of them do a really good job. But easily for me, I think the standout of this entire film, who really I think the movie is worth watching for just for this performance, is Rachel Sennott, who does play Alice here and gives such an incredible performance in this movie. I mean, Alice is the kind of character that if she was played by literally anybody else, she would be so insufferable to watch, because this is the kind of character, she's this podcaster of sorts. She always thinks that she's in the right. She always thinks she's doing things for, she always thinks that she has these, like, amazing morals, but you can tell just how performative she is. You can tell how privileged this character is, and there is one moment especially with her that had me dying of laughter, and it's mainly because of the way Sennott really ended up portraying her, this character. I thought she just did such an amazing job. This character is so overdramatic in that way. About literally everything, she's always overreacting, and Sennott just completely transforms into this character. All I will say to really just praise Sennott's acting, there is a TikTok that has been circulating for a while of Sennott doing this impression of somebody from LA, and if that doesn't sell you on how good she is in this movie, I really don't know what else will. She is so great here. She is such an amazing talent. Already was a big fan of her because of her performance in Shiva Baby last year, but I honestly think this surpasses that, because the role that she has to play here is such a challenging one, but she relishes every single second of it, and she had me absolutely dying in this movie. In terms of comedic performances, I think she is very much the clear standout, but I think also in terms of performances, I think she just does an amazing job here. The entire cast here, everyone really does kill it. They all have such incredible chemistry. They all work really well together, and like I said, this is a movie that is very much relying on the cast overall, and considering how much they need to carry, I think everyone just does such a fantastic job here. But now we got to get to the directing and the writing, which is really when we get into what I think works as well about this film as it does. And Halina Reijn is, right off the bat, this is not a director that I am overly familiar with. I have not seen really any of her previous works, but she knocks it out of the park within this film. And with how good she directed this movie, I definitely do want to check out her other films that she has done, because she has a really specific style to her. You know, I think she really did have a clear goal in mind as to what she wanted this movie to be. And it's honestly very impressive to me what she was able to do here, because she walks this very thin tightrope of this movie that is very funny, has some really great relevant social commentary, almost kind of examining Gen Z as like you know, a society and kind of like, you know, how they carry themselves and things like that, but then also be this really intense, you know, suspenseful film. I think she's able to do both really well, and I think again it's her vision that really helps this movie become something really special. And I think that's one of the reasons this film, I think, is going to live on generations from now. I feel like this is going to be one of those movies that people constantly look back to as like, this is a film that that defined Gen Z overall. I think she just does a really excellent job with that throughout this movie, because this film is very funny. There are a lot of moments that had me laughing hysterically in this movie, but then there are equally just as many moments that were able to, you know, really have me on the edge of my seat, build this tension very well. And I think, again, it's because of just the passion that she put into this film. I think she just did a really great job with that here. And I'm very excited to see what projects she does do down the line, because I think she has a very specific style to her that I think works very well within this movie. Now, getting into the screenplay here, the one thing I do want to address right off the bat is, yes, when it comes to the characters of this movie, they are not exactly the most likable bunch. In fact, most of them are complete assholes, and that's exactly the point. And for me, that is why it works as well as it does. The movie is not trying to act like these characters are in any way, you know, saints. The movie isn't trying to act like these characters are in any way good-natured. They are very self-righteous. They are hypocrites. Everything they accuse the other characters of doing, they also do. And I think that's why this movie works as well as it does, because while I think at first you'll find some of these characters very grating, I think what the movie is really trying to address is, you know, just how blindly unaware they are to it. Every single character in this movie kind of has some insecurity about themselves. There's something they want to leave unexplored. They don't want this to be addressed in any way. You know, for example, our main character, like I said, anything involving like her addiction and things like that, she doesn't want to get into that part of her life. She wants to move far away from it. She kind of wants to use this party as a way to do so. Or you will have a character like, say, Pete Davidson, and him kind of being very insecure on his own. He doesn't want to explore those layers of himself. He wants to come across as very confident. He wants to come across as somebody who's like the life of the, you know, the life of the party and things like that. And I thought that was like very well explored. Every single character in this movie has like something to them that you aren't expecting. And I think that's why this film works as well as it does, especially when we get down to the actual murder. You know, as it's going on and as these characters start to, you know, become more accusatory towards each other, there is a lot of information that is revealed about these characters, and it just made them that much more interesting. It's certainly a film that I want to give a rewatch at some point, because I feel like knowing the things we do now, it will present these characters in a whole new light, and that's something I really did appreciate about this film. I think the characters themselves, you know, are really well done in this movie, because yes, we do have a murder going on, but I really view the murder that happens in this movie as a catalyst that really just opens up all this distrust among these characters, and that's really when this film gets great. Yes, it does take a while to get there. For a while, a lot of this movie are just these characters hanging around and they're talking about the past, or they are, you know, increasingly annoying each other, or they are trying to, you know, or they are trying to, you know, make this part, you know, kind of make up for lost time in a sense. But once the murder goes down, all bets are off, and these characters really just start to pretty much just every character is pretty much walking on eggshells in this movie. It feels like every single character, you don't really know what's going to happen. It adds this layer of unpredictability to the film that I just really enjoyed a lot, and I thought they did a really good job with that. And like I said, I thought every character really just had something about them that I just really found myself latching onto. For example, the character of Emma seems like she has this really great relationship with Pete Davidson, yet as we get further into the film, we start to realize there's a lot about this relationship that isn't great. These characters aren't intimate with each other. These characters, don't really seem to have as deep of a connection as we thought. When you contrast that with Rachel Sennott and Lee Pace's relationship, and just how much these two are all over each other, how obnoxiously they show off, their love and things like that. I think that's something that the movie just does a really good job of. Maria Bakalova's character, there's so much that is unknown about her. How did she get here? How did her and Amandla Stenberg's character end up meeting? Why is she a part of this? How did she get here from Bulgaria? There's so much about her character that is so mysterious in that way. And as I just really liked how much this film, took the time to get to know these characters. And I think that's something that really does help this film overall, and definitely kept me very invested in it throughout. But that being said, while the film is very funny, and there's a lot of moments here that are just some of the funniest moments of the entire year, it's equally as suspenseful. I think the murder itself is still very compelling. I really did find myself constantly guessing throughout as to what was really going on here, who really could be behind all of this. And I thought that's something the movie did do really well, especially as we get further into the third act and the mystery really starts to come to the forefront and more pieces of the puzzle are like gradually coming together. I really just found it to be very satisfying the way everything did end up wrapping up. And sure, I think this movie, it's not going to be for everyone due to just how obnoxious some of these characters are. I think that could be a big turnoff for some people, but for me, I just found it to be a very good approach to this movie. This film has so much to say about practice, about how we carry ourselves, and are the things that we accuse people of the same things that we're doing? Do we practice what we preach in that way? Is there a part of ourselves that we want to hide, or is that the real side of us that we just don't really want to face? There's so much this movie has to say about stuff like that, and I think all of that is just very insightful, very well done, and doesn't feel overly shoved down your throat. It does it in a way that just feels very it just feels like it fits very organically within this movie with what they were trying to accomplish here. So I thought the screenplay overall was just very strong in this film. I think the other thing that works so well about this movie is that while these characters themselves are so insufferable in that way, the way they act, the way that they portray, the terminology they use feels so realistic to how these characters would be. These kind of rich, snobby, privileged characters who have had everything just handed to them pretty much, and you can see have never really dealt with any real conflict. Hell, during this murder, their whole concern is pretty much about their own self-image, their own self-interest in that way. And I think the way this film really does examine all of that, I thought was really well done. And I think that's one of the things that works as well about this movie, is that it does present it in a very authentic manner. It doesn't try to hold back in any way, and I think that's something that people are really going to appreciate about this film. Like I said, for me, though, I think Alice is maybe the standout character of this entire movie, not just because of Rachel Sennott's performance, but just because of the kind of character that she is. Her entire character pretty much is her being this podcaster, her constantly trying to justify her podcast, and constantly being in that mode where, she's bringing up these really serious topics, these hot button issues of sorts, and how just fake it feels. And I think that's something that works so well about her character. I think the satire that the movie is trying to communicate is best examined through the character of Alice. There's a whole scene where she is just talking about how tough it is to podcast, and I have not laughed that hard at anything all year. I mean, I just really love what they end up doing with this character, and for me, she was maybe the highlight of this entire film. I just loved what they ended up doing with her character overall, especially as the film goes on, and this character starts to become a lot more unhinged, as does pretty much everybody in this movie. That character has just some real standout moments that I think are really going to stand the test of time in this movie. I think years from now, when people go back to this movie, I think it's those moments people are constantly going to continue to quote or think about constantly. And this is also one of those films that I think does a really good job of setting up a bunch of little things here and there, little bits of information that we don't think is necessarily important, but then the film comes back around to it and you realize just how important it really is. And I really like the way the film ended up doing that. Yes, like I said, it takes a little while to get to what you wanted to get to, but I think those first like 20-30 minutes or so where it's just these characters kind of hanging around, I think is still crucial to the story because it further gets us to understand certain nuances of these characters that are later explored in a much more detailed fashion within the film, and that's something I really did appreciate. The cinematography here also, I think, is fantastic in this movie. One of the best things about this film, I think, is actually the cinematography. A lot of this film is taking place within the dark, the only light being the characters' iPhones, and I thought that was a really brilliant decision because it really helps set the claustrophobia of this film. You really kind of feel trapped inside this house. You want to get out of there as soon as possible. You want these characters to just go their separate ways because you can see how unhealthy a lot of what they're doing is, and especially knowing that there's a murder looming and things like that. I thought the cinematography was just very well done throughout this movie. I thought the way they utilized darkness, the lighting, all of that was very well done here. I really like the way this film is shot. The score as well, I think, is very effective. It's not used a lot, but I thought overall they did a good job with it. I have seen people compare this film at points to kind of like a play, and I do think that the movie definitely does have some comparisons to that because a lot of it is, you know, just following a bunch of characters trapped in the same room, but the way the film is shot, certain techniques on display, it's able to do enough to where I don't think people are going to call this a, you know, just like a filmed play. I think they're able to do enough here to where it still feels like a movie, and that's something I did really appreciate about this film. And the editing, I think this film overall is very well edited. There are a lot of scenes that very much did take me off guard, and there's a lot of scenes that go on for a long time in this movie, and I think that's something that the film is greatly benefited from. I think that the pacing here was just very tight within this film. It's not too long. I think that in terms of the editing, I think the film is very well paced here, and I just really appreciated what they were doing. And then there's the ending of this movie, and that is the thing that I think is also already dividing a lot of people, and understandably so. The way this movie ends is certainly not the way you expected it to. But I gotta say, I fucking love it. I absolutely adore the way they decided to wrap up this movie because it creates this whole other hidden meaning that you don't even realize the film is really presenting. And the way that they decide to go about it, I thought was just genius. It's equally hilarious, but it's also every bit that kind of like wake-up call where you're like, oh, that's what they were doing. And walking out of the movie, you know, you really start to recognize like what they were really going for, and I just really appreciated how bold the movie was. I mean, they take some really big swings here, and it really is trying to do something different from other films of its kind, and you start to realize that within this film, and I think that's something that they did a really good job with here when it comes down to, you know, when it comes down to the way this movie did end up wrapping up. Again, I don't think it's going to be for everyone, but for me, I just really appreciate the way they ended up ending this film, and kind of like this message of sorts that ties it all together. The soundtrack in this film is also fantastic. I think it really does play a big role here. Like I said, I think the film is very much trying to examine Gen Z, and the type of music that plays in this movie is the type of music you would expect Gen Z to listen to, and I thought it fit in very well within this film. It didn't overpopulate the movie in any way. It didn't feel intrusive or anything like that. I just felt it fit very well within the film, and that's something that I definitely did appreciate. That being said, I don't think everything this film does completely lands. There really is only one glaring issue within this film, and that for me is when it comes to the main relationship in this movie concerning the characters of Sophie and B. Their overall relationship, I do like, and I think it's because of the chemistry that Stenberg and Bakalova has. The problem for me is I don't think we got enough time to really just see these two within their relationship. The movie opens up with these two being very affectionate, seeing that they have this really strong connection, but I just wish the film took a little bit more time so it really got us to latch onto their relationship a little bit more. So that way when things start to go down that concerns their relationship and concerns a lot of the fates of these characters, we would be that much more invested. And I think if they took like 10 to 15 minutes more before they get to the party, I think the film would have been even better in that regard. But with how much this film is able to pull off in the runtime that it has, with how many fresh ideas are implemented within this movie, with how game the cast is here, with how hysterical so much of the dialogue is, the directing by Halina, Reijn just being so bold in that way. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is just the kind of film that I will endlessly gush about. It's the kind of movie that I just don't think we see enough of. Yes, it can be a mystery of sorts, but it's in no way a slasher. This is much more of this social satire that I think is only going to get better with age. I think the more people watch this film, the more hidden meanings they're going to find, the more nuances of these characters that are going to be discovered. There's just so much to adore when it comes to Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. The way they're able to get you to latch onto these characters that all across the board are almost all completely unlikable, I think is just really well done. And while the film I don't think is going to be for everyone because of just how extreme some of these characters are, how obnoxious they can be, and certain directions the ending does take, for me, I just really appreciate how fresh so much of this movie does feel. Yes, we have seen movies quite like this, but not necessarily pulled off in the way this film decides to go about it. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies for me was really just everything that I was hoping it would be, and I am going to give it an A-. But overall, this is my review of Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Let me know if you guys saw this more at all, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.